we hope that whatever we share with you this afternoon would be of some use to you, both in your personal life and in your role as mentors. Okay, so a little bit about our agenda for today. We just had the introductions and overview. The first bit I'll do, it's about the alchemy of human connection and how we can shape reality through conversations. Then I'll go across to Helen. She'll pick up the mantle from there and speak about the power of reframing. And then she'll go across to Dale, who will help us to grow our conversational intelligence and what that means and how you can implement some useful tools that both Helen and Dale will introduce you to in your work as mentors. And then we hopefully at the end we'll have some time and we can take some of your questions. If as we go along you'd like to ask questions, please put them in the chat room, in the chat box, and we'll try to pick them up from there as we go. Okay, so you heard a little bit about ICF, but let me just say one thing. The work we are doing now is with you this afternoon on the webinar is part of what we call International Coaching Week, where coaches like ourselves, members of the International Coach Federation, do pro bono work. And it's designed to help organizations like yours, NGOs, or even businesses to raise their game using coaching principles and being coached themselves as leaders and thought leaders within their organizations. Okay, so on to my bit. I'm hopefully going to spend no more than 20 minutes on this. I want to give you a broad overview and a context in which you can understand some of the tools that Helen and Dale will share with you. So for me, I'm going to share a little bit of the neuroscience, a little bit of business background as to why what we're talking about is important and how you can see your role as mentors somewhat differently going forward. So I want to begin with the word alchemy. And if you take this Cambridge Dictionary definition, you'll see that the part I've circled, it's a process that's so effective it seems like magic. It's a process, the connection between two human beings. Think of your role as mentor and your mentee. And there's something that's going on there below the level of your consciousness that if you become aware of it, you're much more likely to get the kinds of results that you want and the impact that you want as a mentor. So I'm going to begin with the Obama administration. I'm going before Trump, the good old days. And he introduced a big scientific initiative called the Brain Initiative. And it's a testimony to where we are as a community of humans and how important the brain is. And you'll see one of the sponsors is the Allen Foundation. The Brain Initiative is about deepening the understanding of the inner working of the human mind. And this is the big scientific project that began, like I said, with Obama as president. And the Allen Foundation, which is one of the big sponsors, Allen is one of the guys that co-founded Microsoft with Bill Gates. Their impact is, and their hope is to understand the neural code, how brain activity leads to perception, decision-making, and ultimately action. So it's all about how our brains work and how we as humans work. On the European side, on the other side of the Atlantic, they're doing similar work in something called the Human Brain Project. And their goal is to develop a deep understanding of the human brain. And there are loads and loads of scientists in many, many institutions working on this very actively. So this is a real, deeply rooted in science, the kinds of things that we're going to share with you. And the impact, the objective of the Human Brain Project is for the transformation of us all in the 21st century, all us humans. So John Nesbitt, who's a futurist, says the biggest turning point in the human history of the 21st century will not be linked to technology, but to an increased awareness of what it means to be human. And that's a theme that I'm going to take throughout the next few minutes with you. So there are three core ideas I'd like to share with you. One is that we are all as humans wired to connect. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The other is mentoring, and your role as mentors is really about developing trust and the relationship with your mentee. And thirdly, what we're bringing to the table to you this evening is that everything happens through conversations and the importance of having aware conversations. So we want to raise your level of awareness about how conversations are working at the deeper neural and biochemical level, and then some of the tools that you can use to enhance the quality of conversations you have as mentors. Okay, so when I looked at some of the material that Shedron shared with us, I saw this definition that mentoring is a practical approach to help young entrepreneurs develop their abilities and insights. And that kind of stuck with me, and I saw many connections to coaching there. Because as Shedron said, coaching is about a partnering with our client, or in this case for you, your mentee, to maximize their own potential. So, but there are two different perspectives. If you look at the coaching perspective, we come from a place where we assume we know very little or nothing, and that all truth is within the client, and we ask a lot of questions to help them become aware of what's already within them. The other side of it, a different approach, would be mentoring, where you come with experience that you bring to the table to share with the mentor. You advise and guide, and that's how they grow and learn. And I think there's somewhere in there that conversations can help to bridge some of the coaching style that you can incorporate in your mentoring work. Some of the things we share in common with mentoring are here. This is from your last webinar on your mentor training. You know, it's one-to-one, it's confidential, it's trusting and supportive, and all of the good things listed here on the screen. So one of the things you do as a mentor, and we do as coaches, and most leaders in organizations and business people, is ideally to create a thinking environment that is constructive, because as we say here, the quality of everything we do depends on the quality of the thinking we do first. The quality of our thinking depends on the way we treat each other while we are thinking, how we treat each other while we are thinking, in that relationship between yourself and the mentee who's sitting in front of you, who's on the other side of the screen. So as coaches, one of the things that happens in this relationship where you're connecting to the other person is that we create a space, a safe space we call it, where the other person, the mentee, is able to explore themselves, their truths, and what they want to achieve in a manner that is unencumbered. And that way you can get the best out of them. Okay, so the point I want to make when I look at these two slides, these two quotations that came from your mentor training, as you can see, it's all about a relationship. So mentoring really is about developing the relationship, how you can connect with someone and what kinds of feelings you evoke during that relationship, because the feelings will impact the thinking environment. So this is the overall structure. There's a connection that takes place, conversations that happen, and something emerges, something that's co-created between you and the mentor. And that depends a lot on how you connect. And empathy, the ability to connect to other people, is critical. So there are three elements of empathy here. There's cognitive empathy, the ability to understand the other person's perspective, emotional empathy, what we feel, and empathetic concern, the ability to see what the other person needs from you. So all of these things are important. We are wired to connect as human beings. And those connections take place at a neurological level. Yeah. So we do so in two ways. One is biochemical and one is electrochemical. And I'll just share with you that the process of connection has now been scientifically proven to begin up to 10 feet away from the person and happens in less than 1 second. All of that takes place under the level of your awareness. So our wiring to connect takes place not only in the brain, as one might imagine, but also in the stomach, the gut, which is a second brain. You know, those phrases, we have butterflies on our stomach, there's a feeling in my gut, or trust your gut instinct. All of these things have deep science behind them because the brain and the head, and the gut are very closely connected, with the stomach sending the electrical signals back to the brain and telling it how to behave, how to interpret things. So there's a heart-brain connection as well, which we have, and that's linked to our emotions. I'm not going to go into a lot of the science behind that now, but if you'd like to learn more, I invite you to go to heartmath.org, which is a very important source of scientific research in this area. So we also have something called mirror neurons that help us to understand and to almost read the other person's mind. Again, this is an area that you can go off and find more information on. I'm just pointing you to it at the moment, because mirror neurons, when we become aware of them and how they work, we realize, as Dan Siegel says here, when we attune with others, we allow our own internal state to shift, to come to resonate with the inner world of another person. And it's that felt feeling, as he says, that causes close relationships to emerge. We are hardwired to perceive the mind of another person. Even though you're not consciously aware of it, that's what's happening inside of your head. Okay, and the two sets of chemicals, or a whole host of chemicals, but the two that we talk about are cortisol, that we trigger in someone, or oxytocin that we can equally trigger in someone when we're having conversations with them. And Dale will talk a little bit more about this under CIQ. So the point I want to make here as we go forward is that we are humans, and as we begin to understand our role as mentors, understand your human evolution and what is happening to us. That many, many years ago, let's say 4.5 million years ago, we had smaller craniums, our brains were smaller, but that evolved over time. And with that evolution, we were able to go through a number of societal changes from the agrarian to the industrial to the information age, and now what we call the connection economy. Along that, what has been causing that has been an evolution in how our brains work and how we become more and more connected through our minds. As Yuval Hariri, who's an Israeli historian, says, our ability to be the dominant species on the planet is really connected to our ability to relate to each other and to work, as he says, flexibly and in large numbers. That is a uniquely human trait. No other species is able to do that. And language is key in that. Language is the original disruptive technology that transformed what we were, an insignificant species, into a social world order dominating the earth. So our organizations have evolved from tribes and clans into very complex business organizations that are transnational around the world. And that is a reflection of how we as humans have evolved. I'll skip some of this in the interest of time. So the world we live in now is very complex and full of digital networks, and that is causing us to connect to many, many people all over the world and changing how we live and interact. I'm seeing something flashing here. Is that me being told I have 2 more minutes? No, not yet. Okay, let me X this off here. And so the new world we're living in is significantly different. According to Drucker, he says, every few hundred years in Western history, there occurs a sharp transformation. 50 years later, there is a new world. And the people born then cannot imagine the world in which their grandparents lived. So your kids cannot imagine a world before the internet, a world before mobile phones, the world of their grandparents. And their children will have a world that is even much more different than the one that we're currently living in now. Okay, the World Economic Forum says that the internet-based economy has become the economy, and that what we see now was the domain of science fiction movies previously. That's how much it's changing. Alvin Toffler, who's a futurist, says that given this kind of network and complex world that we live in, we are poised to have ourselves be overloaded with information. And that is going to create mental problems for most of humanity. And this is a point that Master Nan, who was an advisor to the Chinese government until he died in 2012, has also made, and he's been saying this for many, many years. He says that there will be something called Jeshu, a rupture in the fabric of human history, and that we will live in a very different world, that previously came off the agricultural fields into factories and we had pneumonia. And in the 20th century, we began to deal with plastics and chemicals and we began to get cancer. He's saying in the 21st century that the information overload will cause a mental imbalance, and the issues around human consciousness and self-awareness will become dominant. In such a world, trust and relationships become the new currency. Seth Godin is a marketing guru for some of you who don't know. Okay, so in this world that we're living in, we're consuming more and more data every day. 90% of the world's data was only generated in the last 2 years. And we're creating, as you know, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. That's 18 zeros, 2.5 and 18 zeros. Much, tons of data that we have to comb through and understand. What does this mean? It means that the complexity of our language is becoming increasing in complexity, and that there's a stat that says we're doubling the words that we use every year. Imagine that. As humans, as mentors, you have access to double the amount of words that would have been used the previous year. And that makes your relationship infinitely more complex. And the conversations that you and your mentees who are young, many of them are now coming out of school or now coming out into business, and they see the world very differently from some of us older people. So our essential human skills, our ability to connect, empathy, and active listening, as they're saying here, will become more important, not so much a technology. Here are some of the skills that your mentees are going to have. Critical thinking. They have to be able to collaborate across networks. agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurship, effective oral and written communication, curiosity and imagination. How can you engender these and promote these? Through your relationships and conversations. Mentoring is about a conversation. And Ken Blanchard reminds us that conversations are so important that our lives succeed or fail gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. While no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a business, a marriage, or a life, any single conversation can. Your conversation with your mentee can change your life. The conversation is the relationship, okay? And bear in mind that, the science is also showing, work by Mark Robert Wallman and Andrew Newberg are saying that a single word in a conversation can trigger fear and cortisol, or you can create trust and oxytocin and change the nature of the relationship. And that brings us on to conversational intelligence, which is what Dale will talk a little bit about more. She'll say to you that conversations are more than just sharing words and information. Conversations are the way we connect, engage, navigate, and transform the world with others. Everything happens through conversations. So this is how we reshape reality, through our conversations. Language is orchestrating human connection and social engagement with our imagination. Think about that for a moment, how powerful that could be, that you have the ability to shape someone else's world through the dialogue you're having with them. And there are three kinds of reality that we have to talk about. One is an objective reality. So if I walk into a radioactive room, whether or not I believe that is so, I'm going to get sick. Then there's subjective reality, the things that take place in our own head. And the example that is often given is like a child's imaginary friend. No one else can see it, but that person can. So that's very subjective and personal. And then we have the intersubjective reality. This is what we create and agree to as being real, like nation states or money or religions. These are all parts of what we call the intersubjective reality. And that's where your work as mentors become very important, because you are creating a new reality with your mentee. That's the kind of work that you have to pay attention to. Bearing in mind that each individual has their own subjective reality that's informed by their ego and by their past, the assumptions that they hold, the beliefs that they hold. And that may be very different from yours. How they come into the conversation, their history will be different from yours. And you have to find a common space. I'll leave this one to Dale in case she goes with this, but this basically is saying that the biochemical and electrical impulses that I spoke about are taking place below the level of your consciousness, but that they are informing how you interact. They are informing how you connect, and they are shaping the nature of the connection without you even knowing. So the more you can become aware of it, the more effective you can be as mentors. We have many, many biases, and if you go to visualcapitalist.com, you'll see this diagram. It exposes over 200 cognitive biases that we all are exposed to as human beings. But we make many of our decisions unconsciously, and as mentors, unconscious decisions, you come in with your experience, you come in with a way of seeing things being right. And for you, it has worked, but perhaps for your mentee, it may be different. They come from a different place with different experience. And you have to be aware enough to know that how you see reality, what you seem to be true, what you hold to be true, may not be what they hold to be true. And that's something that you have to be consistently aware of. Let me go past this. So this diagram is very instructive with respect to how we shape reality. This green area is where your mentoring takes place, where your version of truth and their version of truth intersect. That's the magic for you. And if you were to shift people's behavior, we must first shift their underlying beliefs. You must find some kind of common ground to have some shared reality. And it's important that you continue to take the perspective of the other person in your conversations. We fail to take adequately into account the fact that people with different worldviews, different perspectives, value different things and have different priorities. So be consistently aware of that. I'll close off in a minute or so, but let me just show you this, that there's a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's here in the front of our brain. And that's where we have our executive decision-making skills, where we do strategic thinking and long-term planning, where we develop leadership skills. And it's where coaching and mentoring takes place. We tap into the ability for imagination and seeing possibility. those abilities only take place when the prefrontal cortex is activated. And that happens in a high trust, safe, and caring environment that you as a mentor must create. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for some of these things you see here. It's empathy, insight, response flexibility, where we pause between something and our reaction to it or response to it, or intuition, which is a very real sense of inner knowing, and communication or conversations, and how we modulate fear. And fear will determine whether or not we are coming from a place of trust or a place of distrust. Okay, I have 1 more minute, only to say to you that as you have conversations, depending on what you trigger in the other person, either consciously or unconsciously, you will create an environment of trust or distrust. And that's where you are able to either shape reality or not. If you're coming from a place of mistrust, it's very unlikely you will be able to bring the best out of your mentee. Remember that trust and relationships are the new currency of this new digital, highly connected, highly complex world that we live in. And that mentoring is about a relationship, that conversations are about the relationship, and that you have, through your conversation, the ability to develop your mentees' own abilities and their insights for the kind of future that they want for themselves. And that's it. Remember that you are the instrument. What kind of energy and chemistry you want and activate will depend on you through the conversations that you have. So that's it for me, Sharon. I hope I haven't gone too fast. My time is now up, and I'll turn it back to you so we can get on to Helen.
All right, great. Thank you, Richard. I mean, trust and relationship is the new currency, or are the new currency. And as our mentoring program, we need to really build trust in our relationships to have a better connection with our mentors. So now we're going to pass you on to Helen Carrington, and she's going to talk around the power of reframing. Helen?
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to be, I assume you can hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, right. So what I'm going to be looking at is that as a mentor, part of your role is helping persons to be able to see sort of the big picture, helping them to challenge their models, their assumptions, challenge their way of thinking, seeing, and being. It's about reframing, sharing tools that would allow you to help that process by allowing persons to reframe how they see things. So you can use it for that purpose. And especially, I think, when you're working with entrepreneurs and when there's a perceived failure, to be able to reframe that so that they can be learning that's taking place. So like this picture here, it's taken from a plane, a lovely picture that I like. And the idea is, how can you, through your working with your mentee, be able to give them this big picture view, be able to have them see things from a different perspective. And as Richard spoke, he's mentioned about how our brains work, and through your conversations, you want to be able to activate alternative routes to behaviors, habits that people have to help them think in a different way. So helping them to reframe, to be able to use different opportunities, different paths to go forward. So I'm going to share with you briefly the GROW coaching model. So this is a simple model that can be used when you're in your role as a coach with your, I'm going to share a little bit about appreciative inquiry, which is a strength-based approach, and see how you can apply that to the coaching model. And then also spend a little time just on reframing, you know, the idea of using powerful questions to reframe and helping persons shift their state of mind. Whoops, okay. Having some issues here. Right, so this is the GROW coaching model. You'll find little short videos online that are very helpful, but I'm just gonna share with you very quickly. It's, I call it like an everyday coaching model, because you can use this in from a quick conversation with someone to a longer coaching engagement, but it's really just presenting a way for you to structure a conversation that is more in line with being in coach mode. So there are 4 simple steps to the model. One is about first establishing the goal. So working with the mentee to sort of say, what is it that they want to achieve? And what do they want from you? So establish that up front. You notice something before talking about what's wrong or, what we want to change. Really about, what is it that you want to achieve? Focus on that objective. The next step is about examining current reality. And that's where the coach is helping the mentee sort of explore what's happening now. Where am I? What's important? And then after that, we then move on to options, which is to say, what can we be doing differently? What options do we have? What if we looked at it this way? What new ideas can we build? So just laying out all of those options, and finally making a decision in terms of the way forward. What do we want to do? And really pinning them down in relation to actions that they're going to be taken after the session. So this is a model that you can, as I said, structure in a quick conversation with a mentee, as well as something more structured. And this provides here the idea of the kinds of questions you'd be using at different stages. As Richard pointed out, when you're in coach mode, this is more of an ask mode, not tell. So a lot of these questions, these are your tools for helping that person to be able to establish for themselves what they want to do going forward. So this is something that you can have a closer look at. We can share this with you as well. And transitioning a bit into the approach called appreciative inquiry. I'm going to connect it to the coaching model in a minute. But appreciative inquiry is an interesting approach, which is looking at helping organizations change through building on strengths and potential. So it's not just looking at the upside of down, but actually facilitating their ability to expand perspectives in terms of looking for viable solutions. It's based on the theory of social constructionism, which Richard spoke about, which in terms of conversations, that our reality is built around the conversations that we have with each other. And appreciative inquiry is saying we should choose the type of conversations we want to have. So we should speak to what we want. We should speak about learning from what works well. So it's almost like you have a report card from a child, a parent is looking at this report card and says, okay, what happened in history? Why did you get the D? But appreciative inquiry is saying we should ask about the math mark. We should ask about the A. We should say, if you got the A, what were you doing? How were you operating in order to get that A? Maybe I did extra work. Maybe I teamed up with a friend at school. We did, so it's really about saying, change the focus of what we want to investigate to where we want to go. Focus on what works and find out more about that in order to apply it to areas that are not working. So in this sense, the idea for when you're in coach mode, if you have a mentee who's stuck on a problem, one way of looking at this is sort of say, okay, in your past, when have you had a success similar to this? And have them tell that story around the success. And as they're speaking, you're looking for strengths that are coming up. Okay, so at that time, I noticed you said you were operating in this way or you're doing that. And then saying, how can we take those strengths and apply it to the problem that you're having now? So again, it's really turning the model around in terms of not digging deeper into problems, but saying, how can we explore with our mentees when they're doing things right, when they're performing well, and how they can learn from that process. So that's the AI approach. I really encourage you to look into it further. It's really exciting. So that brings us to this idea of reframing, because to me, AI is also in itself a reframing process of saying, look at something from a different angle. So reframing is used to change perspective in order to see new options. So as a mentor, when you're in coach mode, the question is, how can I help this person move from, say, the narrow thought in terms of where you know, kind of this narrow view of where I am, to opening that up a bit in terms of a big picture. How can I help them shift into rational thinking, to take away the emotion related to some of their decision making because they're so tightly wedded to something? You know, it's their baby, they want this thing to work. How can I help them see it from a more rational perspective? How can I help them to be more comprehensive in their thinking, to be able to bring different perspectives from different persons in through my questioning? And again, a lot of times decisions have to be made. How can I help them to be clear and comfortable and confident in making those decisions when they have to step forward? So here are some ways in terms of, you know, the kinds of questions, the shifts that you can help these persons make when they reach these points of inflection. You can say, you know, you're looking at from passive to active. So someone is saying, I really doubt that I can do anything about this. And you're saying, you know what, I can, you know, why don't you look at what is one small step that you can make to take you forward, you know? So you have these different shifts that can take place in conversation, you know, past to future. I've never been good at public speaking, but you'll be able to sort of say, you know, if you imagined yourself in this role, you know, what would it look like? So helping that person shift from that stuck position by spinning it on its head to a different place. Shifting, again, same way, different way, sorry, in terms of future to past, you know, looking at others to self. How can I get them to be in someone else's shoes? Maybe even their competitors, you know, how would they be seeing this situation? And then again, also if they, you know, there's from a liability to an asset, how can they see the challenges that they experience as tools for moving forward? So being able to help them to see things from different angles, open up their view, to be able to recognize new opportunities for them to grow, develop, and have new choices as they go forward. And shifting, reframing in a sense, I spoke a little bit there about the use of questions to help persons move to a different place, but there's also this idea in relation to your state of mind, because I like this quote very much. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And this idea that everyone is wearing, you know, a pair of rose-colored glasses, seeing a reality. In Richard's diagram, you know, you had these two realities. And we have to work with each other to figure out, you know, how can I be more aware of how I see things and be able to look at it from a different angle, as well as appreciating that when I am in a certain mode, it is going to impact how I perform and the decisions that I make. So I want to introduce you to the state of mind tool, which is speaking to the reality that at any one moment in time, you are in a certain mode in terms of how you feel, the emotion, you know, any state, singular moment, you have a certain state of mind. And the reality is that that state of mind is having an impact on your performance. So for example, this tool, very simple, there's a neutral line and then there's sort of +1, 2, 3, -1, 2, 3. In terms of what those levels are, you can decide how you define them. But the idea is to have an appreciation as to where am I at a certain point in time. So when you're working with your mentee, and they're in a challenging place, getting them to be much more aware of how they're feeling and how that may impact the decisions that they make. So first, establishing where am I? Am I at a +1? Am I at -2? And research has shown that based on where we are, it's going to impact different domains. So for example, problem solving here, you know, depending on if I'm upset, am I going to really be in a state of mind to be effective when it comes to problem solving? And at the same time, interestingly, you know, if you're at a +3 and you're euphoric about something, am I being realistic? And there's an article, How Your State of Mind Affects Your Performance, that you can get, an HBR article, which speaks to this and the importance of, one, appreciating where you are, because it's going to have an impact on your performance. And secondly, depending on where you are, am I able to shift myself into a mode that is much more productive and allows me to function? So there are two approaches to shifting state of mind. First, helping your mentee to be able to acknowledge, this is where I am, being able to label it, name it. This is how I'm feeling, this is my state of mind. And then the next is, how can I shift it? And there are obviously fundamentals in relation to just having a healthy state of mind to begin with. We all know that if we don't sleep well, if we don't have that exercise, etc., we're not going to be at our best. So these are sort of fundamental foundation elements for making sure that you're in the right state of mind. And we mustn't forget as well those practices that bring joy to us, bring relaxation, that also help with that state of mind. But if you're in a situation where your mentees, helping them to use this tool in a way that they need to shift, they're in a certain state of mind, they're below the line, and they have to be able to shift to be increase their performance. The suggestion is, first, you engage in intentional breathing. Have them slow down. Intentional breathing, being very aware of your breath, helps persons to kind of re-engage and be more close to how they're feeling and where they are. So getting yourself centered through engaging in intentional breathing. This next step is to recognize and label your state of mind. Where am I? How am I feeling? Being able to give it a name. Because often we simplify our feelings into, the four: I'm happy, sad, mad, but not really looking at other options in terms of how we're feeling. And again, we avoid self-judgment. This is where I am, this is how I'm feeling, that's where I am. But then you have to be able to say, how can I reset? And there are lots of different ways of doing this. One is in terms of, being able to reframe your thoughts, focus attention elsewhere, also getting things down in writing, just getting that out in a note sometimes allows that brain to be sort of freed up to switch to different work that has to be done. The second is being able to impact the emotion itself in terms of, expressing gratitude, being able to engage and talk with someone, the importance of those connections that Richard referred to. Just switching modes and being able to create some lightness by engaging, expressing gratitude. And from the presentation as well, that changes the whole the hormonal balance in your body and how you will be feeling, and switching that state of mind. And thirdly, there's the options of being able to take a break, take a walk, just move around, using your body in a different way. So all of these are options for, if using this tool with a mentee, you can share this with them and facilitate in terms of helping them to be able to shift into a mode where they can be much more productive, increase their performance, and really, it impacts the kinds of decisions that they make going forward. So this is the state of mind tool. One last piece, I didn't know if I was running out of time here, but one last piece is this, tying it back to the reframing, is simple questions to be able to reframe thinking. We're in a situation, you need to shift, what else is possible? You're looking at opening up the viewfinder in a sense, to be able to look at a bigger field of vision. What really matters to that person? What could you learn from the situation, especially in those areas where times when persons feel that they failed or they have, it's not what they expected. And being able to connect with the emotion, to be able to tap into that gut level that Richard referred to, in terms of, what is my gut saying? What is my heart saying in relation to these decisions I have to make and how I can move forward? So in closing, first there's the coaching model that you can explore a little further in helping you to organize the conversations that you would have with your mentees in a structured fashion, in a way that is an ask mode, in that coach mode, to be able to guide them through a conversation that helps them to come up with their own solutions and take action on those. Then there is the idea of, through your questioning, how can you open up that field of vision for them to help them to see things in a different way that, again, would also present more possibilities and learning for them. And the state of mind tool being another way of being able to shift the way we see things, to be able to regulate ourselves, to be able to be more productive and more effective in our delivery. So those are the three bits that I am sharing in this presentation. I hope it can be helpful, and I'm going to stop my sharing and hand over to Dale. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Helen. So Dale, as you put up your presentation slides there, I just kind of wanted to take a look back at the new AI, because I remember when I was watching AI, I was wondering how it could come into the conversation. And when we take a look at even our thought process when we speak to our mentees, and not understanding our state of mind as mentors before we even approach them, we're quick to find out what are the entrepreneur's problem and try to solve their problems. But we're taking into the relationship our own emotions and our own stresses sometimes. I know it's speaking to them not about the problems, but looking at what's working and keeping them at that positive thought process and looking at what is possible for the future. So now I'll pass you on to my chair, so my best behavior today. So Dale, I'll pass it on to you. I'm meeting you as well. I'm seeing your slides up already.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Thank the Lord, I remembered to unmute it. So thank you, Shadron. Wow. Helen and Richard, thank you for your rich and thought-provoking presentations. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat, nodding my head and being so totally engaged in the content that you were providing. Folks, I am delighted to be here. My intent for this afternoon, for my part of this presentation, is to provide you now with the opportunity to get some insights into how to become more conversationally intelligent as mentors. And with a little caveat in brackets that really it goes way beyond just in your role as mentors. This is in your role as human beings, because what we're really trying to do is to create a world in which we can bring that sense of humanity back. So, how to be more conversationally intelligent as mentors? Wait, hold on. There we go. So what we're going to look at is some CIQ, conversational intelligence, how-tos. We're going to look at a couple of tools, but essentially what we want to do is to understand how to use them so that we can intensify the connections and in so doing, deepen the conversations, and in so doing, then strengthen the relationships, out of which will come changes in behavior. And if we get it right, then we can talk about how culture really changes. It starts with the connection. So the impact I'd like to have with you this afternoon is that by the time we finish, you will leave with these practical tools feeling excited, inspired, intrigued. I hope there's loads of additional stuff that you can go to, and we'd be happy to provide you with links and with some support. But we're essentially empowered because it can be done. And yes, it can be done. Richard has told us that we are wired to do it. Helen has started to show us that there are ways in which we can do it. So let's explore that just a little bit further. And we'll start with just a couple of fundamentals because, see, words can shift our neurochemistry. Words have power. I mean, I remember when I must have been about 14 at a boarding school in Barbados. If you had said the word beetles to me, I wasn't going to think of the hard-backed insect. Because there were 4 guys, British guys in Barbados, on a tour of the island. And I remember distinctly standing up in my school uniform behind the fence. It was a convent there. Behind the fence on Collymore Rock for hours in the hot sun, waiting to see these 4 guys drive past. Words have power, folks. The power to shift our neurochemistry. So they can excite us and they can calm us. They can uplift us and they can shame us. They can sadden and make us joyful. They can scare us and they can embolden us. Yet, they're so often misunderstood, or should I say misinterpreted? Because you see, we leave conversations assuming that we're on the same page, when in fact we're not. We must use, research is showing, an average of about 16,000 words a day. There are trillions of conversations taking place, but daily 9 out of 10 conversations may miss their mark. We think it's sweets we're talking about. But which variety? Which one will be your favorite? And which is the one we are aiming for? And even as we speak, right now, I know that you think that you're believing that you're understanding what you think I'm saying. But really, I'm not so sure that you realize that what you are hearing is not necessarily what I mean. And that just gives us an idea of how complicated it can get. You know, we see things, and I think Helen just said that, we see things as we are, not necessarily as they are. So give us a little bit of feedback. Put into your chat room what words are standing out for you so far this afternoon. Words have power. Share with us the most powerful words you've been hearing this afternoon, the ones that are having an impact on you, making you feel excited, making you feel empowered. I'm going to ask Richard to monitor them for me. And Richard, can you call out a few of them as you see them coming in?
Mindfulness of the spoken word, connection. Someone else said words, brain wiring.
Mm-hmm.
Still waiting. Relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Trust.
Mm-hmm.
One more. Evolution.
Wow.
Strengthening.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll leave that for now.
Yeah. Yeah. Some amazing words. And the thing that is so fascinating is that although we know we are wired to connect, we know we are wired to detect threat, we know we are wired to bond and to be cohesive with each other, what also happens is that we each bring to each situation, to each conversation, our unique life experiences. And I think therein is where sometimes we run into the difficulty of interpretation. So I have some words for you, some CIQ words for you that we can play with over the next few minutes. One is the conversational dashboard. And 2 words that you might think of putting together, particularly in the context of your role as mentors. But what if there was a way to know what the other person is truly thinking in the conversation? What if there was a way to make that invisible invisible reaction that the other person is having more visible to us. What would that then allow us to do? Because see, kind of knowing where we are in the conversation is reasonably simple. But figuring out where the other person is can take a little more work. But again, what we're realizing is that it can be done. And we are wired to do it. This is the conversational intelligence dashboard. We use it to gauge trust. As you look at it, and I'll talk it through with you, let's see what jumps out at us. Notice, for example, that there are 3 levels of trust. There's low trust, there's conditional trust, and there's high trust. Notice where they are placed in relation to the mindsets. So when one is in low trust, typically one might be in a mindset of resistance or skepticism. Resistance is, this will not work, and to the point where I might do something to sabotage it. Or the skeptic, well, I tried that at least 15 times in the last, I don't know how long, and it didn't work then, so why should it work now? Notice where conditional trust is with the mindset of wait and see. Well, this songing as though it could make some sense. But I'm not too sure. I'll wait and see. We use these words. Notice how the conditional trust shifts into the experimental. Because in the experimental, you're becoming a little more engaged, Well, yeah, I figure we could try this out. And I might even help to make sure it could work. Maybe this is what I can do. And then you move to high trust, where, you're coming up with the ideas. In fact, the mentee is calling you and saying, well, let me tell you what I thought about last night. And you then have to understand how to navigate all of the conversations he's going to want to have with you because he's excited. This arc that you're seeing that goes from red into green is what we call the arc of engagement. And if one of the things we need to do in order to partner and through partnership to make things work, get behavior to shift and to change, get the mindsets to shift and to change so that the behavior can change, then how useful might it be to kind of walk around with this arc of engagement, this dashboard in your head, and be using it? Not only when you're in conversations, but quite frankly, before. And we come to that in a minute because we're talking about the mindset here, not only of the other person. We're also talking about your own mindset. And sometimes I feel that the first conversations we have to start to have the conversations with ourselves. Notice too how the behavior associated with resistor and skeptic and low trust is behavior of protection. That means my defenses are up, partner. And I am definitely not going to be open because I have to protect myself. At that point, your amygdala is flared up. Your cortisol is in high gear. And you're really not in a position to be listening, other than to confirm the fact that you're right. And or notice too how the partner behavior comes out of, I would say, from the conditional going into the high trust. It's not only high trust allows you to partner, that's when you're partnering at your best, but understand that what sometimes we see from people is tentative moves, tentative shifts, and we need to be able to acknowledge those tentative moves and shifts so that we meet the person where he is and work with him, journey with him, and support him as he moves towards high trust to partnering. Notice as well, listening to judge, to connect, not to judge, not to confirm that you're right, not to reject the other person because they're wrong. That is the essential tool or catalyst for moving from protect to partner. And notice the I and the we, so that when we're in protect mode, we can't think of anybody else but ourselves. At that point, the amygdala is telling the prefrontal cortex, shut down, I'm in charge, you're under threat, leave it to me. Well, hello. If that is the way we live our lives, and some people choose to, then life can become a bit troubling. And the point I want to make is that I guess we may all know what Timari is. Timari, from my days growing up and going into the square, Victoria Square, and being fascinated by these little weeds that when you touch, immediately close up. Well, folks, we are not Timari. Okay? And there is so much that we can do to understand, and Helen started to touch on it through reframing. There's so much we can do to understand what's going on in the moment through self-awareness and self-regulation that allows us to stay in the moment and to be agile in the moment so that the conversation, as far as possible, can move from a protective stance to a partnering stance and to stay there. Understanding, of course, that this is a dashboard. And if your dashboard is anything like the dashboard in my car, these, where you are on these gauges, perhaps particularly the gas gauge is constantly moving, or the speedometer. So understand that this is dynamic. This is not by any means a static dashboard. Yes? So the question to you is, how can we use this conversational intelligence dashboard, this arc of engagement, the knowledge and the richness that comes out of this? How can you use this and put it into your trust mix as mentors to let your trust grow? And this adds a little layer, an additional layer to the conversational dashboard, because it gives you the trust model. Now, I chose this particularly because, okay, so trust is the substance of all successful relationships, but perhaps most importantly, in the mentor-mentee relationship. And without trust, then, you kind of go into that resistor, skeptic, protective type of mode, which is tense. And a successful, sustainable relationship depends then on the trust. So here are a couple of things. There are just 5 things that you can do today to add trust into your mix. 1, be transparent about your intentions. This is what I'd like to achieve. This is what I want to make possible. This is the impact I'd like to have. This is how I want to show up with you in this conversation. Put the relationship first. I know you might have 10 questions to ask, but put the relationship first by priming with the person. Priming for trust first. Make sure that trust is existing first, because through that, you will get the tasks completed. Sometimes people ask me, well, how many questions do I need to take into a session? I say, well, the only question you need to ask at any given time is 1. And as you work with your mentees, as we work as coaches with our clients, it is because we are listening deeply, with soft eyes, as some people call it. It's because we're listening that way that we know what is the right question to ask in the moment. And then 3 is understand. Step into their world. Understand the fear, understand the sense of inadequacy, understand the skepticism they may be feeling. We know this entrepreneurship journey is a tough one, a challenging one. And for as many highs, there are many lows. Step into their world without judgment. Understand what shared success is, so that perhaps you can drill down, and I'll come back to that in a minute, drill down to find out what success really means, truly means to that person. So you must be asking maybe 2 or 3 questions around that success, not just accepting the first definition or response that you get. And then T, the last T. Well, you know, this is linked to our willingness to be vulnerable. Because if this relationship is going to be strong, I have to be able sometimes to give you feedback and to do it with love, but also with candor. And the relationship has got to be strong enough to handle the candor. Because the last thing you want is for somebody to say to you, but why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you help me? We move on to another favorite CIQ tool of mine. And these are the 5 conversational essentials. I've highlighted a few words there that are particularly, I think, powerful ones for us to reflect on. See, these essentials are like the tools we use to navigate our conversations with others, to prevent the conversations from sticking. Here's the first one. We just talked about it. Well, listen to connect, not to judge or confirm or reject or reply. How about focusing on the other person, not just on me and how I feel and how I want the other person to feel? Being able to move beyond that, so that in the moment, what we are doing, particularly as a mentor, is helping the other party, helping the mentee's reaction to actually change. One of the ways we do that is not by telling them, we're shifting to ask mode. So we're not asking questions that we know the answer for because we want them to get to a point that we think is the right point for them. Because that's not really creating a safe space for people to show up as they are. So what we do here is ask questions which you truly do not have the answer. And what that allows us to do, you see, is coupled with listening, because you can't ask a question and then don't listen properly. Or when they answer truthfully, want to tell them what you think they should have been doing. It starts to feel like manipulation, and manipulation breaks trust. Also, asking questions which you truly have no answers puts you in a spirit, in a mindset of curiosity. When that happens, the other party starts to share that mindset of curiosity so that you can then explore. We, as a team, mentor and mentee, plenty experience with some experience, knowledge and aspiration. You can share, and out of that, perhaps find new connections that neither of you all had seen before. New solutions, new pathways may become apparent, especially when you start to consider how very different the economy and the world in which the young entrepreneur is starting and scaling compared to the economy and the world in which we did it. Yeah. So here might be some of the questions. I won't go into them, but here might be some of the questions. Notice many of them start with the word what. And And there are discovery questions as well as the innovation questions. So understand how you might want to play with it too. Then we've got priming for trust. What the point I want to make here as a conversational essential is that, you see priming? So you're painting your house, it's Christmas coming. What's the first thing you're going to do when you decide you had to paint? We had a prime. Well, no, I think you have to scrape the walls first. And then you have to prime. I'm not good at this. You prime first. So that the reason why you're priming is in order to make this paint stick, not so? It's got to go on and it's got to stay there. Well, that's what you want to have happen here. You want the trust to come in and you want the trust to stick so that the connection can be strong and sustained, because there are going to be times when you have to use candor. There are going to be times when you won't get it. There will be times when the conversation may not go the way you want it to go. And that's where the foundation of trust becomes absolutely imperative. Let's move on. What does trust mean to you? The same way I suggest that you perhaps with your mentee one of these days sit down and say, well, let's talk about success. Let's talk about success. What does success mean to you? Perhaps you can sit down and say, well, what does trust mean to you? Particularly trust in this relationship between you and me. See what kind of words come out. And remember, you want to question down 2, 3, 4 levels because you want to make sure that you're getting to the truth. Sustaining conversational agility. Well, this is one that I like, because you see, it's one thing to have your intent, to know what you want to make possible with the other person in the conversation. It's a one thing to know the impact you want to have, which is how you want the other person to feel and to experience you. But it's another thing to become aware, to stay aware, self-aware in the moment, so that you understand and pick up how the other person is actually receiving you. And then, after all that, have the agility to flex going back to your intent. Because we know words have power. And we know that the words that we use don't always get received in the way that we want them to get received. And sometimes the relationship may be a bit shaky. Sometimes there are areas of vulnerability that the other person hasn't yet disclosed to you. And you may touch on one. You may trigger something that you don't even have any knowledge of. And we've got to be aware in the moment when those things may be happening. And this is when we use our reframing, refocusing, and redirecting. Because what we want to do is change the context of the story or change the lens of the story. Maybe we just need to reframe it. So failure may be learning. We may want to refocus, which may be to shift, move away from that narrow, detailed focus, which is how I feel, to perhaps some broader perspective of what's good for the relationship, what's good for the business, and to redirect, so that having reframed and refocused, we are able to shift our energies, shift our actions into a different place where we start seeing new possibilities that can be created. We go, you know, I feel like a failure. I lost the contract. Well, how can we look at this from the lens of learning? I'm really frustrated. I don't know how much more of this I can take. What is the hold up with the bank? What is the hold up with this? What is the hold up with that? Why does it take so long? Well, sometimes the question I ask myself is, what is trying to happen here? Because I know what is not happening. But sometimes a great question to ask is, what is trying to happen here? And when that happens, you shift your focus from, oh, these people are so that and the other. And well, is there something different that's trying to happen? And what might it be? And what might the implication for me be? And the third, of course, it's impossible. I can't do this. Well, what might the situation be asking from you? And when might you have done something like that before? How can you draw on your strengths so that you're not only seeing where your gaps are? And the fifth, double clicking. Well, I don't know who uses a mouse any longer. So I think we may have to do something about this one. But the idea is that what you want to do with double clicking is to be able in any scenario, again, where you're searching for meaning, to be able to double click, open up a new window, open up another window, open up another window. How many of us, we go searching, and we have across the top all these windows open, and we're moving from one to the other. And as we do so, we're seeing new intersections, seeing new relationships, seeing some contradictions as well, but we're growing and learning. So folks, never be satisfied with the first answer. Double click and double click and double click again. Because again, what you really want to find out is which sweetie they want. And we look at the same thing, we see different things. What are you seeing here? You seeing the young woman, or you seeing the crone, the old crone? And you know, depending on what you see, you might create a whole story and dramas around that. Richard was talking, showed you a little slide, and we don't have time to get into it, of the ladder of conclusions, but my goodness, we're good at drawing conclusions. Making all kind of assumptions and drawing all kind of conclusions without double clicking. I'm not telling you to not draw a conclusion, but double click first now. Ask questions which you don't really know the answer as well. Be open, listen really well, because in so doing, you're going to open up that shared space where your definition of success, or your definition of trust, and your definition of whatever it is, of reality, is shared with the other persons. So, the conversational essentials. To get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture. So we're coming back down, which depends on the quality of the relationships, which depends on the quality of the conversation. Everything happens through conversation. Everything. And once you're in there and you're in the game of conversation, understand how these conversational essentials work, and understand how you can use the arc of engagement, the conversational dashboard, to understand where you are, where the other person is, and what you might be able to do to shift. See, here's a challenge and the opportunity. We know now that many conversations miss their mark. But what if we could, instead of seeing conversations as ways to tell other people what we think and to get things off our chest, and well, they really need to hear this, rather to see conversations as a thread that connects us to each other, as a source of nourishment and fuel that will navigate our mentoring journey into the future with our partners. So, a few questions to end. What can I focus on starting today from this webinar to open up more connectivity in my mentoring relationship? How can I keep our conversations healthy and two-way, creating by listening to connect, not judge or reject? How can I co-create with my mentee a shared definition of success, focusing on the we together, not on the I? And how can we replace expectations with aspirations? Aspirations that help us to create then space to innovate and think differently and to challenge in healthy ways and to learn from each other. This is something that I created earlier this year because I was reading Achibe's Manifesto for Feminism. And it inspired me to, and I just finished reading Michelle Obama's Becoming. And you realize that there's no journey that's ending. It's just a journey that's continuing, a journey of becoming that is continuing. And the thing about the Manifesto for Feminism is that if one reads it, one realizes that if in fact we were to start being more human, then perhaps there would not be a need for some of these things, because we'd simply be treating each other as human beings. So what you've got here in this 2019 Conversational Manifesto, and it's a manifesto because a manifesto is a public declaration of commitment, of something that you can hold me to. So how about if, as mentors, as human beings, we decided to publish a conversational intelligence manifesto? This is my offering to you. It takes all the things we've been talking about, and it kind of shifts them into some kind of process and order with a little challenge for each. Let me say that there are no finite answers. We are all on a journey of becoming human. And I hope that in my short presentation to you this afternoon and in this webinar, you're leaving with energy, inspiration, empowering thoughts about the magnificence of the work that you can do to help these and support these young entrepreneurs to navigate this complicated world that we're all living in. Folks, thank you so very much.
Great. Thanks, Dale. I was giving everybody a one-liner to kind of sum up what they said, but I had too much one-liners to pull from you. Right? I mean, one of the things that I think that stood out to me would have been in terms of stepping into the entrepreneurs, the mentees world without your emotions and really offering that support. So with that, we will want to step into your questions, right, folks? And let's hear from you. If you have any final questions, things that you want clarified, anything that you want us to go a little deeper in, we have 5 minutes of our scheduled time. So we could get a deep dive. If you have any questions, you can post it within the chat, or you can turn off your mic and you can give us a direct chat and we can hear from you.
Folks, while you're thinking of your questions, let me just make a little plug. Our ICF Caribbean chapter, we have a Facebook page that we've just launched. I'm going to invite all of you to go find it. Or Chevron, we can send the link off to you and you can send it out to everyone. Please visit our page, like it, and get involved in the conversation. You have a lot of useful information there that as mentors, you can learn from the coaching experience and some of the coaching tools that we use and our dialogue that you can incorporate into your own work. So the floor is open for questions. And if you don't have any right now, send them off to Chevron. Sure. He'll get them back to us and we'll be happy to answer them. If not now, certainly in the future. Yeah. Someone is saying you all seem to be using a lot of neuropsychology. This is very interesting. And yes, this is, we've discovered in the last 10 years more about how our neurobiology works than we have in all of previous human history. We are on the cusp of understanding what the brain does and how we can leverage higher order facilities that we have. That is going to be a very exciting field for years to come. Yeah. Okay, group seems quiet. Mm-hmm. We are at 6:27. Chevron, I'm tossing it back to you for any final words, but on behalf of the team, Dale and Helen and all of the ICF coaches in the Caribbean, thank you all from Youth Business Caribbean for being here with us today. We hope that you have taken something away, some things away that you can apply. Hopefully your way of thinking about your role and how you can engage your mentees may have been augmented slightly, and that's a win for us. Yeah.
All right. And well, Richard, Helen, Dale, on behalf of Youth Business Caribbean and Youth Business Trinidad and Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados Youth Business Trust, and the Jamaica Youth Business Trust. We want to thank you for offering us this experience. It went beyond a webinar to more of an experience in terms of really helping our volunteers and even at the office level connect deeper with our mentees. And I know questions didn't come direct, but I'm seeing the flooded of emails that I'm going to get because you said Senator Shedron. All right, but I can live with it. Don't worry. All right, so thank you for attending, folks. We're going to try to have a couple more of these webinars to really strengthen our mentors and their connection with the mentees. So you'll get probably a post-webinar survey, and we will want you to kind of suggest what topics you want us to kind of dive into. Let us hear what you want us to talk about. All right, great. So thank you for your time. We started at 5, we're ending at 6:29. Perfect Caribbean time. All right, guys. So thank you for being here. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.